Welcome and thank you very much for joining us on episode 146 of the Blazers Edge podcast, presented to you today by BlazersEdge.com. I'm your weekend host, Chris Lucia.
146, where has the time gone? Jeez, I'm your weekend co-host, Brandon Goldner. If you want to get in touch with the Blazers Edge Weekend podcast, you can shoot us an email. It's going to be blazersedgepodcast@gmail.com. And as always, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also check us out on Stitcher and YouTube.
Joining us this week on the Blazers Edge Weekend podcast is Blazers Edge news editor David MacKay. David, thanks for coming on a Friday night, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, it's been kind of an interesting week in Rip City. There's been some crazy news that came down the pipeline on Wednesday. Longtime television announcers for the Portland Trail Blazers, Mike Barrett and color analyst Mike Rice, were let go by Blazers president and CEO Chris McGowan. Antonio Harvey, the radio color analyst, was let go as well. So the only remaining member from the television and radio broadcast teams from the last several seasons is going to be radio play-by-play announcer Brian Wheeler. So Brandon, I want to throw it to you first for your kind of reaction on everything that went down. What do you make of the Blazers kind of ousting Barrett, Rice, and Harvey?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely different in the light of day now that we know the Blazers did have a direction that they wanted to take it with longtime Seattle Supersonics TV announcer Kevin Calabro. But the news was shocking. I think it definitely took me by surprise. I'm assuming it took a lot of other people by surprise, including Mike Barrett and Mike Rice himself. Mike Barrett in particular did say a couple different times, both when he responded first on Twitter and when he gave an interview to the Oregonian's Joe Freeman, that he was surprised by the news. And just on a personal level, I mean, I have been following the Blazers for a very long time. You both have as well. I think for all three of us, Mike and Mike were an institution of sorts. And it's really, honestly, it's kind of weird to move on from that. And just to say, I did get a chance to meet them in person for the first time in what ended up being their last game ever that they would broadcast together, Game 6 against the Clippers this year in the first round. And they were just super, super kind. They were familiar with me and our work here at Blazers Edge, had good things to say about us, but they took their time with me and with everyone else who wanted pictures with them after the game. They must have been exhausted. And just to say, I personally will miss them. David, what did you make of the news?
Oh, it felt like it came out of nowhere, and to just see the responses on Twitter, the outpouring of support for both of them was incredible. I mean, they've been at it for a long time, and I feel like they really touched the Portland community. I do think that from an on-court, in-game analytical perspective, there could be some progression here, so I think that's good. But at the same time, it was really sad to just kind of see them both caught off guard.
The thing about Mike Rice is, and I know that there's a substantial amount of fans that tuned into Blazers broadcast, and we're probably hoping for a bit more of an X's and O's approach from the commentating crew. And Barrett and Rice didn't necessarily deliver that in spades. But what they did, and what Rice did in particular, was I think he kind of embraced the folly of what live sports can potentially be, and the entertainment aspect of what live sports is. Because at the end of the day, to steal a phrase from Neil O'Shea, Mike Rice was an entertaining guy to watch, an entertaining guy to listen to. I mean, at 77 years old, to cover 82 regular season games a year, and the first round of the playoffs the way he did for 11 seasons. 10 seasons with Mike Barrett. I mean, that was incredible to me. And personally, I like to watch basketball, and I love hearing the breakdowns, and I love hearing you tune into a Minnesota Timberwolves broadcast, and they have a color commentator who's actually really, really breaks down the game for you, so you kind of start to understand everything that's going on in the court. That's something that I absolutely appreciate, but I can't say enough for what Mike Rice brought to the broadcast in terms of entertainment. It just, for me, I'm absolutely going to miss that, and I don't think you can really replace Mike Rice. But I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing the Blazers hopefully bringing in somebody who can be just as entertaining.
And just to say, I think you make a good point about the X's and O's aspect of color commentating, but Mike Rice was no slouch himself, right? I mean, he was a coach. He's been around the game for a long time. And there was a game against the Clippers not too long ago, and there's a clip of it on YouTube where Mike Rice calls not one, but two consecutive plays. It was the game in which the Blazers were ahead late in the game against the Clippers, and then the Clippers tied it, and then the Clippers won on a J.J. Redick jump shot. Mike Rice called both of those plays, and it's true that he was not the most analytic analyst, but I felt like I did get something from the broadcast at least a couple times a game. I thought Rice would bring something, and I would learn a thing or two. I think that aspect of his analysis was maybe a little bit underrated.
Oh, for sure, and I wanted to step in and agree with that. He's definitely a very smart guy. He knows the game, and I think his sort of embracing of the jocular nature of his announcing was almost winking at the parody of yeah, I suppose Brandon just made a sipping motion.
It's just juice.
Oh yeah, no, Rice was a spirited fellow, especially by the fourth quarter. But yeah, he I think knew that his analysis wasn't always, as you said, X's and O's, but there's a purpose to that flavor, and I think it worked very well for the most part. Although, if you go online and check forums, fans of opposing teams typically aren't fans of our announcing.
Yeah, I would have to say the Blazers announcers were probably one of the most polarizing groups in the NBA. Besides the Clippers announcers, I won't even get into it. Can't stand those guys. But yeah, Blazers were polarizing.
In terms of the league and overall quality, the Blazers there was an article last summer where they were rated, and I think the Blazers brought third of the league. So from a national perspective, I think a lot of people were in, more or less. People who had tuned into the Blazers more than a couple times were kind of in on the shtick, more or less, and kind of got it. And credit to MB too for being a really solid play-by-play guy. But they did bring in a new lead analyst for their television broadcast, and that's Kevin Calabro. So we know him as a longtime Seattle Supersonics. Left Seattle in 2008. He did not follow the team to Oklahoma City, electing to stay in Seattle. He's been doing ESPN radio broadcasts for the NBA Finals. He's been doing the Cleveland Cavaliers Golden State Warriors series this year. So Kevin Calabro brings a very high degree of professionalism. He has a pretty solid pedigree. What is... let's listen to him a little bit. Brandon, I understand you've prepared a little bit of a clip that we can hear him in.
Yeah, I just wanted to give the listeners a feel for what you're going to get with Kevin Calabro. This clip we're going to listen to is from a game he broadcast with the Seattle Supersonics in 1994 in their first round playoff series against the Denver Nuggets. Let's give it a listen.
Kemp with two hands across midcourt, averts Williams. Jump pass ahead of McMillan down the near wing. He'll pull up with the ball, have it ahead. Rolls that leather in the palms, feeds over to Cage, covered by Ellis. Michael hands off to Peyton, up fake, drives the slower Ellis into the lane. Turns the corner, stops. In midair, gives off to Kemp. He juggles it, got it, hooks it up, missed it. Rebound, Cage, battling with Ellis. Saved inbounds by Peyton. Right to Kemp, beneath the lid, stutter step. In he comes, blocked, got it back, hooks it up, no. Rebound, Kendall up, no. Blocked by Williams, grabbed by Kemp. In the lane, following jumper, blocked by Williams. Outside of McMillan. Cross court to Gary for the three. Yes! Oh, that's the way you get it done.
All right, so that was Kevin Calabro on the call in that 1994 series. As we know, that was a series where the 8th-ranked Denver Nuggets overtook the number 1-ranked Seattle Supersonics in the first round. You might remember that classic picture of Dikembe Mutombo clutching the basketball, lying on the court. So, Chris, what is it that you heard in that clip from Kevin Calabro that might differ a little bit from Mike Rice and Mike Barrett?
Well, first off, I want to say shout out to Nate McMillan, who was a player on the Seattle Supersonics on that 1994 team. You may have heard his name in that broadcast from Kevin Calabro. But, my next observation from that was that if you listen long enough, you hear that the game score is 11-6 in the first quarter. So, Kevin Calabro is bringing the heat when it's a 5-point game, 3 minutes into the game there. So that's really my first observation there, is that he really brings the energy. I'm not saying that MB and Rice, the wild one, didn't bring the energy. You don't earn a moniker like the wild one without bringing energy. But I think Kevin Calabro's performance speaks for itself there. What do you think, David?
Oh, absolutely. And I was pretty impressed that, a lot of things were happening there, and he was able to track the ball, and not only where it was, but who had it and what they were doing at all times. And, when things are just moving at such a brisk pace, and you're able to do that clearly with enthusiasm and be informative to your audience, that's a skill.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of those observations. And also, just to say, his enunciation and diction was just perfect. I mean, I say this as someone who has only been podcasting for, a relatively short amount of time. And so I'm constantly thinking about how I can do better when I'm on air. And something that I really took from that clip in particular is that even though it was extremely energetic, exciting part of the basketball game, you could hear his energy, hear his excitement, but you could also hear every word that he said. Nothing ran together, nothing got sloppy. And I don't know, I think that's definitely a skill when you can convey that really super hot, high energy, but still be able to do it in a way where people can hear what you're saying. I think that definitely is a skill.
It absolutely is a skill in and of itself. And you look at a guy like Calabro, who has so much experience on the radio, that's theater of the mind there. So nobody who's listening to that, obviously is able to watch the game. So you have to kind of explain it in a way that makes sense. You have 10 guys on a court, 2 baskets and a ball, bouncing all over the place. And you heard, as David identified, Kevin Calabro was on top of every single thing. And as you noted, Brandon, his enunciation was perfect, and the energy, it was definitely right there.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is, if I am not mistaken, I believe that Kevin Calabro was doing simulcast for over a decade, which is when you're doing the audio for both the TV and the radio feed. If you close your eyes, and actually, I guess the listeners here, you can really get a sense of what's happening on the court. It did sound a little bit like a radio broadcast, which personally I appreciate. I understand with TV, because people can get the visual, they don't necessarily need to hear every movement on the court. But frankly, if you're going to go with either more information or less information, as long as it's presented in a way that's accessible, I'm going to go for more information personally.
Definitely, and it's going to leave a little bit for there's going to be room there for the radio, or I'm sorry, the color analyst, whoever the Blazers decide to hire, to really fill in the cracks there where Kevin Calabro doesn't. So Kevin is calling the play, he's identifying what's going on in a very accurate fashion, and a very in a way that illustrates to the watcher exactly what's going on. And so that color commentator hire that they bring in is going to be really important, and we're going to get to that in just a minute. But we do have a couple of Twitter questions here that we actually wanted to talk about. So Brandon, did you want to bring up some of those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. This one comes from Jared Butler on Twitter, JButlerPDX, and he asks, I would like to know if the new TV deal that's in the works of the Blazers, he would like to know what that deal is so that he can drop Comcast.
So fortunately, Brandon and I did have time to consult with Blazers Edge moderation editor Timmy before actually responding to this question, because Timmy's kind of a whiz to this stuff. And shout out to Timmy, because he definitely follows all this broadcasting type stuff, and he relays the information to a lot of the Blazers Edge staff really articulately, and it really helps us quite a bit. So shout out to him for that, and also doing everything that he does with moderation. I know it's kind of an unheralded job at times, but I want to make sure that he and his moderating staff get the credit. But Timmy's response to this question is, Comcast advantage is that they're already in place. The support system is there. The only thing missing is getting carriage across satellite networks and smaller providers. Comcast has one big advantage, however. They could offer to improve the broadcast carriages for this coming season as part of a new contract. If the Blazers go elsewhere, Comcast can just keep doing what they've done and say whatever as a lame duck provider. Root Sports has the advantage of being a Seattle-based company, so they would help the Blazers expand marketing into Seattle. Fans already know this channel for Mariner games, and Calabro, who's also based in Seattle, will be calling the games. It's a great idea for market expansion. Also, Root is on DirecTV and Dish Network already, so that's not a concern at all. The negative is that they'd have to build an NBA support system from scratch, which isn't the end of the world, as they already have experience with MLB. Streaming is an option that should be discussed. The Blazers could use their own system, or they could try to contract with Amazon, Twitch, Yahoo Video, YouTube, Netflix, etc. If they plan a subscription plan, it will be just a fraction of the money they make with a broadcast contract, which would be bad. So we may not be able to be looking forward to streaming, but it looks like from everything that we gathered from what Timmy said, and we had some reports from Maury Brown from Forbes.com on Blazers Edge if you want to check that out. It looks like there's some pretty solid negotiations right now going on between the Trailblazers and Root Sports. So it looks like they could potentially be leaving Comcast. So what do you make of all that, David?
Oh, I'm like 99% sure they're going to Root Sports Northwest. I mean, if you guys remember back in April, Chris McGowan met with them and spoke with them about various contract things for when their Comcast deal is up. It just makes a whole lot of sense because you've got Paul Allen, a Seattle native, a Washington resident, owner of the Seahawks. You know, it makes sense to me that he would want to switch to Root Sports. If he gets McGowan to make it happen, then that's fantastic. They bring in Calabro, who's a Washington sportscasting icon, and it fits so perfectly. And as you mentioned, they already have DirecTV, they already have Dish. People who want to drop Comcast can. This is nothing against Comcast coverage. They do a great job, but Comcast, the overall company, I think most people prefer to avoid, and for good reason.
The disadvantage there, it seems, for Comcast is that they started the channel to carry the Blazers coverage whenever they decided to this deal, which was, I think it was 2006 or 2007 maybe. And, you know, in that deal, they launched Comcast Sports Northwest, you know, and that was only available for subscribers to Comcast. So it makes sense to me switching to a deal where you have a channel that's carried by multiple providers there. So you switch over to Root, you get yourself on DirecTV, you get yourself on Dish Network. You could potentially be on Comcast as well. I think they cover a lot of Root programming as well, so they may be able to carry the Root, whatever Root Northwest they do to cover Blazer games. So it seems like in terms of reaching the largest audience, and if you buy into the Blazers really wanting to make inroads into Seattle, it seems like Root Sports is the way to go. Do you have any thoughts on this, Brandon?
Not specifically on making inroads to the Seattle market. I mean, I definitely, you know, since Seattle was uprooted and taken to Oklahoma City, you have a huge number of fans who've either probably lost interest in the NBA altogether or became Blazers fans. I don't know if either one of you two know if there are too many people who went from being Sonics fans to Thunder fans. I know if our team was taken away from Portland, I definitely would not follow whatever city it went to. But what I can say, oh yeah, David, did you have something to say about that?
Oh, I just want to jump in and say I know people who were Sonics fans who are adamant haters of Oklahoma City. They just don't want them to experience any success ever.
That's exactly how I would feel about it. So what I can say though is, and I frankly am approaching this subject with somewhat of an ignorant lens, but what I do know is that it's 2016. Many people have broadband internet connections, and many people like myself do not have television, but they do have internet. The number of folks who no longer have television has been growing every year, and the fact that I cannot legally access Blazers games from my home in Portland is absolutely asinine. My hope is that whatever contract they sign, be it with Fox or Root, or if they do decide to go back to Comcast, I do hope that there is some kind of option where I can pay money to watch the games from the comfort of my living room. If their thought is that by freezing me out, people like me out from being able to watch the games is going to get me to go to the Moda Center, I think that is absolutely not true at all. I'm just not going to watch. So I'm hoping that there is an option where I can pay money so that I can watch the games. That would be awesome.
But what seems most likely in terms of streaming from what we've seen in the past and the way that these things are worked out is that streaming, if it were offered, would likely be offered to subscribers of whatever television package the Blazers television provider happens to be on. So if you're a DirecTV subscriber, you can log on to directtv.com and tune into the games that way. It seems to be that's how they would do it, as opposed to a la carte streaming, where excuse me, they say whatever, for $2.95 a game you can tune in on a game by game basis. I think what they're trying to do in these kind of negotiations, with streaming, it kind of gums up everything, because it changes the way that the advertising works. That's going to be completely different than the way that television advertising works. So I imagine streaming being what it is, and how ineffective advertising can be on the internet, I don't think it's quite as financially viable for a team to offer streaming on an a la carte basis, because they want to get them to watch the games on TV, so they're seeing the ads that advertisers are paying big bucks for.
I mean, who needs to see television ads when you have gems like Mike Rice telling me how much he loves putting salt and pepper on his McDonald's Egg McMuffin? Oh, my mouth is watering just thinking about it.
Well, I mean, streaming is indeed the future of media consumption, I believe, at least for the immediate future. The crossroads there is that, like you said, it's not financially viable for the team. It's just an access thing for the fans. So there needs to be a halfway point for that to work, and I don't know that they'll meet one by the time their contract with Comcast is up.
So my question is this, and maybe you both have more insight than myself. So right now, they are getting, again, using myself as an example, they're getting $0 of my dollars. So how many of my dollars would they need to have, let's say for the season, if I bought a season package, to make it financially viable? Because it seems to me that I know that there obviously is a great amount of cost, not only in the production values and recording and getting it out there, and a way to get the information from where they're broadcasting it to you. But I mean, isn't there a point at which it does become financially viable, even if there only are a small number of people taking advantage of that streaming? I mean, there still are tons and tons of people who do have cable packages, who do have televisions, but for those of us who do not have televisions, it just, I don't know, for some reason, it seems to me that getting some amount of my money is better than getting $0 amount of my money, but maybe that's ignorant.
There's going to be a shift eventually, no doubt. As David said, viewers are trending toward using the internet to get most of their viewing. Now, live sports is definitely something that has been lagging behind. I think that's a big reason why a lot of people actually still have their TV subscriptions and satellite subscriptions, is just for the live sports aspect. So eventually that's going to catch up. But like I said, I think on the onset here, we're going to see basically a subscription-based streaming option, if there is one at all, where you have to be a subscriber to whatever provider is running the Blazers broadcast. So Brandon, let's move on from that a little bit and get into a little bit of speculation on who the potential color commentary could be. So do we have any more questions from Twitter?
Yeah, definitely. We do have a question from Twitter. This is coming from Wyatt Burris at KidWB52, who asks, who do we think would be a good color commentator to pair with Kevin Calabro? What do you guys think?
Okay, so I have some wishful thinking. Now, this isn't speculation. This isn't me saying that I think this is what the Blazers are going to do, but this is my wish list. Okay, so personally, I'm really bummed about Mike Rice. Okay, I think I said that earlier. I just want to reiterate that point. I don't think there's going to be anybody that's going to genuinely replace him. I think he's going to have very big shoes to fill, at least to this Portland Trailblazers fan who's been listening for a while. But one way that Chris McGowan and the Blazers organization could make this up to fans who really loved Mike Rice and were really into what he brought to the table, at least for me personally, one guy they could bring back, I think one thing they should do is bring back a former Blazer, okay? So somebody that there's a strong connection with in that sense, somebody who does have some knowledge of the game on the court. So my first suggestions are Brandon Roy or Rasheed Wallace. Those are the only two in my mind where I would immediately say, all right, I'm totally fine with Mike Rice being gone at this point. I could not wait to get Rasheed Wallace back in some sort of a role with the Blazers. Same for Brandon Roy. It would be amazing to see him back in some sort of a role with the Blazers, and especially a TV role where you get to hear him 82 games a year plus the first round of the playoffs. That would be absolutely amazing, in my opinion.
Well, I want to say, first of all, that I would love to have Sheed. The only thing is he would, I think in his first game, tie Mike Rice's record for a sportscaster being ejected from a game. And by his second game, he'd have broken that record. But on the Brandon Roy front, I love the guy. I have his jersey. I think he's fantastically good at basketball, of course, or at least he was when he could walk around and play. And he's smart, but I wouldn't want to hear his voice for an entire game. It's really high. It's kind of in the back of his throat, and it cracks.
Hey!
Yeah, exactly. Hey! So I'd love to hear his take on things, but it doesn't have that Mike Barrett deep mellow. It's more grating, and I don't think I could handle that.
B-Roy's voice, though, is so specific. Like, when you hear him, you absolutely do know who he is. And for me, when I hear him, when they were bringing him on, I think they brought him on to do a TV interview on one or two of the Blazers broadcasts in the past when he came back for, was that Jamal Crawford? Had an important game that Brandon Roy came back for. I think he was on the broadcast, and you hear him in their interviews, and he has that voice, and you immediately know it's Brandon Roy. And for me, when I hear that voice, all those memories come rushing back to me. The 2011 playoffs was that Game 4, the against the Mavericks in the fourth quarter. Memories like that come back. The turnaround against the Houston Rockets, that 3-pointer that he nailed from half court, things like that. All the memories from Brandon Roy. I do not associate that specific voice that he has, I guess, as negatively as you guys do.
Oh, I don't associate it negatively. I just think the same can be kind of said for Gilbert Gottfried. People know immediately that he's talking when you hear that voice.
That's a burn for sure.
Well, I'm not saying that the memories of Hollywood Square at all compare to those playoff games and those half court shots, because they definitely evoke a different feeling. But having a recognizable voice only gets you so far. I think after a quarter of a season, the novelty would have worn off, and unless he has just some sterling analysis to offer, I don't know if I could listen to it forever and ever.
I think that's fair. And just to I'm going to try to think of someone who maybe wouldn't tick the box for Chris as a former Blazer, but at least someone who played in Oregon at Oregon State University, my alma mater. Go Beavers.
I guess I'm a Duck as well, so boo? Question mark? Boo. Boo.
We can see which one of you really cares. One of you is wearing a Ducks hoodie.
You can see that. They can't see that.
Well, pop those letters. I'm sure the listeners can hear it through the airwaves. I'm thinking about Bones. I'm thinking about Brent Barry. Brent Barry is a very, very solid analyst. He has been broadcasting for a number of years. And one thing I really like about him, I'm a fan of the daily NBA show, The Starters, and Brent Barry goes on that show, pretty often. And one piece of insight that he had about his broadcasting is that he's constantly trying to get better. One aspect of his broadcasting, again, as a color analyst, as someone who is supporting the play-by-play, is you have to be entertaining in some way, shape, or form, or you have to add value in ways other than play-by-play. And how he's adding value is through humor. His pun game is strong. He's got that nice kind of relaxing, deep voice that David would definitely go for. So, So, if I'm going to go with anyone, I'm going to go with Brent Barry.
The hiring of Kevin Calabro to me signifies that the Blazers are going in a more professional direction. They're kind of taking that approach where they're getting people who have a solid, proven resume and doing what they're doing. I don't think they would put a newbie next to Kevin Calabro. That'd be kind of defeating the purpose. So I think that kind of makes Brandon Roy a pipe dream, and to some extent Rasheed Wallace. I know he does have a bit of experience behind the mic, but I'm not sure if he's called any NBA games, at least not in a long-term situation. So those are certainly pipe dreams. From my perspective as a Blazer fan, wanting to get somebody back. But what about? I guess he's probably unexperienced as well. Terrell Brandon, University of Oregon graduate, right? Portland native. He's got the barbershop in Portland, or at least he did. I mean, he's got strong roots in the community. That would be a solid get, but I guess he doesn't have much experience either.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you just have ducks on the brain right now, Chris.
All the time.
Yeah, I mean, I could go for that. I was trying to think of someone else, like thinking like a newly retired player who's trying to break into broadcasting. Tracy McGrady, up or down on that?
Oh, that'd be dope.
I would love that.
T-Mac. I mean, and it's true, like Chris, you said it. The Blazers obviously wanting to go in a more professional direction. I heard comments from a couple of different national analysts, and they phrased it different ways, but essentially the message was, well, the Blazers just got professional talent for a local broadcast team, which is definitely, a huge get. Yeah, I don't know who they're going to put beside him, but I also heard that Kevin Calabro will have input into whoever will be working alongside him, which you'd have to assume that he's pretty happy about.
I think personally, Brent Barry, all joking aside, would be probably my first choice. I think just based on listening to the national broadcast he's done and everything you mentioned, having a good feel for the game, being a former player, being a former, this was 21 years ago, former slam dunk contest champion.
Free throw line.
With the toe 6 inches over the line, but for a dude,
you don't count that though.
In 1995-96, that was an absolutely amazing dunk. I mean, what was it? 2 years before, D. Brown only had to put his arm over his eyes, and that got him a dunk contest championship. So, Brent Barry has the pedigree there from the slam dunk championship. I think that would be awesome. Unfortunately, he is a former Beaver, but I think we could put that past us because he does bring a lot of insight to the game, a lot of solid anecdotes. Personally, I would love to have him in Portland calling the games.
Yes, Brent Barry would definitely be dope. And just one last thought on Kevin Calabro. Definitely can't be mad at a man who has his own basketball card. If you go to Blazers Edge Twitter account at Blazers Edge, you will see what I mean. I just tweeted it out a second ago. Pretty much the dopest basketball card I've ever seen in my life.
Definitely check that out. Kevin Calabro with the mic in his hand, the green glamour shots by Deb style background. You're definitely going to enjoy that. But that's going to bring us to the end of this show this week. David MacKay, I want to thank you very much for coming on, man.
Hey, and again, thank you for having me. I don't think I've ever not met a thank you with a thank you there. It's just great to be here every time. I love talking to you guys. It's a great flow. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk Blazers.
And we are all done with episode 146 of the Blazers Edge podcast. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us this week. I'd also like to thank Blazers Edge news editor David MacKay for coming on the program.
Yeah, it's always good to talk to David. We have been working together for a long time. He had the unenviable task of editing my work at Rip City Project when he was the editor there a number of years ago. So big props to David. Thanks for coming on again. As always, our intro and outro beats are crafted by local beatmaker Odar. You can check out his work at soundcloud.com/OdarBeats. Please be sure to tune in to our next episode and also to the podcast, The Fanalists, with Tara and Joe coming up, I believe, on Tuesday. And until then, for Chris Lucia, I'm Brandon Goldner. And remember, if your light is too low, you're probably not going to be able to see anything.